Well, in Bellagio, I worked on a project on economic issues in peace negotiations, and which at the time was a topic that was very much really not on the radar. Not on the radar of the United Nations, not on the radar of many peace negotiators. Then in Bellagio, I worked on one chapter in that book on the role of the private sector in peace negotiations. And that happened to be a topic that has come back and back and back again. With regards to peace negotiations, but also with regards to much broader peace-building programs, and how, in fact, the private sector has played a role or has not played a role in specific settings. Private sector doesn't only mean, in this context, that it is the international private sector. Local companies, from the corner shop vendor to national companies, to seizable companies that employ 100 people or so forth, the small and medium-sized companies. Because, in fact, these are the actors, the smaller ones, that are most impacted by violence, because that they have no real alternative to hedge against the effects of violence. So they are the most impacted because they have no alternative strategy. So there have been a lot of activities in places like Sri Lanka, in places like Uganda, also in Latin America, of course, where armed violence reduction and prevention has been very strong, where business councils have in fact been very effective to bring together different sectors of the economy in order to identify what is in fact in the private sector of reducing violence. And violence doesn't just mean the physical shooting of weapons, but also violence with regards to extortion, kidnapping, and other elements that are part of violence. A lot of my work has also focused on direct engagements with company representatives that are really involved in thinking about the security of major investment areas. So here the focus shifts perhaps a little bit more to the big international company that has billions of dollars invested into fragile and conflict-affected environments. This was in fact a phenomenal effort we did with the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, because we managed to line up a pretty frank exchange between experts in peacebuilding and conflict prevention from the UN level and the various specialized agencies, and with their equivalents from the private sector. And one of the results were that they really are engaged in pretty much similar circumstances, and sometimes physically very close to each other, but they use a completely different vocabulary. So if we, perhaps in the UN parlance, we speak about conflict prevention, in the business language is much more about risk mitigation. And one of the objectives of our work was in fact that there is a much better mutual understanding between these communities. So we had two of these exchanges, reaching out about to 100 people, and found out that there is in fact a way to bring some of what these two communities or these multiple communities are doing in specific contexts together and work towards like a more joint vision for specific contexts. Because if there is one message which came out of these processes, it was that we don't need big global processes. We need very context-specific efforts where we work across institutions and sectors. I've been now in this business for over 10 years, and there are many, many dedicated individuals in the peace-building world and in the business world who understand the kind of problems an investment will be faced with if the investment is not being really implemented in the right way. And for the companies, there's in fact a lot in this, because here it is about protecting the asset. If you have multiple billion dollars invested in a specific place and violence continues to erode your asset, you have a pretty big interest in terms of wanting to protect that assets. So many companies understood that a securitized response to protecting that asset is ultimately perhaps even self-defeating, and are warming up to the issue of non-securitized responses, which involve in fact classic peace process designs. I know individuals who do work for big companies who implement what in the peace-building community means nearly a national dialogue process, in specific regions, of course, surrounding a large-scale investment. I also know business individuals who have pretty much implemented what we would call a peace process surrounding a large-scale investment in various countries. The thing is, the peace builders in the formal UN side or in the non-governmental world, they don't necessarily know about these initiatives because the business world doesn't publicize them a lot. So it's just one example to show how much mutual learning that there is to do, and how also some of these communities need to perhaps warm up a little bit to the idea of there's a lot to learn from the other side. And it's not just business that has to open up. It's also the peace-building crowd which has to open up, because I think there's a lot of mutual barriers which we have to pull down, and well, my work is about helping a little bit on that path.